Hi everyone and welcome to Creative Cakes by Sharon. Today I am doing a cake which is very easy for beginners to do, and it is one of the logos from Monster High. So let's get started. I have here an 8-inch cake, my offset spatula, a sharp knife, a pair of scissors and my rolling pin. I also have some white, black and pink fondant as well as a little bit of buttercream frosting. I've got a template for the Monster High skull as well as a board which I've already covered. You can get a copy of the template on the link below provided. So as with all of my 2D cakes, the first thing we need to do is use our template to cut the excess around the cake. So with a sharp knife, just follow the edge of the template, cutting off the excess and removing all of this cake. Now that we've got the shape of our cake, we're just going to cover it with a nice layer of buttercream frosting. This adds to the flavour of the cake as well as providing a base for the fondant to stick to. So I'm just going to cover the entire cake, the top and the sides, with the buttercream frosting, and once I have an even layer I'm going to pop it in the fridge for about 15 minutes for a crust to form on the icing. While the cake is in the fridge, I'm going to work on the other elements of the cake, such as the eyes, the nose and the bow. So I'm just going to cut those pieces out of the stencil and get them ready. I'm going to start off with my pink fondant to create the bow, and I'm going to roll it out not too thin. I want to keep it at about 1/2 centimetre thick, and then simply just put the stencil on top and trace around the bow. Don't forget to smooth all the edges once you're finished. Just pick it up and use your finger to create a nice even smooth surface. Using the black fondant now, I'm going to work on the eyes and the nose. So I'm just going to take off half of my fondant and roll it out fairly thin again. Perhaps not as thick as the bow this time, probably about 2 to 3 mil thick, and just place my stencils on top of the black fondant and trace around them, and then leave them aside to dry a little bit. Now that the cake is cooled and it's dry to the touch, I'm going to smooth the surface, and I'm going to do this with a paper towel. So just place it on top of the cake and smooth around the entire surface of the cake with my hand, making sure the top and the sides are all as smooth as possible. Now I've grabbed my white fondant and I'm going to roll that out into a big circle so that it's enough to cover the entire cake. So we're looking for about 3 to 4 mil thickness here. Now I'm going to slide my cake into position and gently lay the white fondant over the top of the cake. I'm going to trim away most of the excess to make it a little bit easier to work with, and then working around the cake I'm going to start smoothing out into the edges, making sure I go around all of the sides nicely to get those shapes of the skull. Again, with my pizza cutter I'm going to trim off all of the excess fondant right up to the very edge of the cake. And once I've done this, I'm going to transfer my cake onto the board. The face comes together fairly quickly now for the Monster High skull, so just position my template onto the cake and grab the bow to start with and position that onto the face. I've got the nose here which I've positioned, and I'm just going to adhere that with some water, and then moving on to the eyes, position them into place and then very carefully remove the template off the top of the cake, and use my paintbrush and some water again to stick the eyes into position. The final detail for the cake is making the border to go right around the skull and the bow. So just with a black piece of fondant I'm going to roll out a very long snake, and then I'm going to trim it off a little bit because I want a shorter piece for the bow, and with my paintbrush I'm just going to rub some water around the edges of the bow and as well as the little crease on each side of the bow, and then just place the black fondant on either side into the crease and around the edges of the bow and also the round of the center of the bow. Now to make the final border, the easiest thing I've found to do is to lay the long snake fondant on the sides of the skull and then trace around the edge of the cake with a wet paintbrush, and then from one side of the bow slowly lift up that fondant and gently place it all around the sides of the cake. Take your time in placing this in position because we're working with black fondant here on white, and there is a chance that if you press it in the wrong position you may end up with a black mark on your white fondant. When you get to the other side of the bow, just trim off any excess fondant, and there you'll have your finished Monster High skull cake. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and enjoy making one of these for yourself at home. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel for regular video tutorials.